Damon begins the series as a restless, ambitious man who wants to be appreciated, respected, and perhaps even loved by his family. But of course, he would never say that. One of the first scenes with him in Season 1 sees him complaining, a bit peevishly, a little childishly almost, in my opinion, that not once had Viserys asked him to be his hand to the king, like as if it's something you would ask multiple times. Like, you've only asked me to be hand, 5 or 6 times, bro. What's up with that? Never mind that he had been Master of Laws, Master of Coin, then Lord Commander of the Gold Cloaks. So Viserys gave him a lot, and he had a lot in life before that. He was a prince, a dragon rider, the wielder of Dark Sister. Still, it's a fairly regular thing to see nobility propped up with false claims of valor or skill. See Harry the Heir and Sansa's plotline, for example, or Mace Tyrell talking about his great victories that he didn't really earn. Part of what makes Damon such a compelling character is that his reputation for martial prowess is actually deserved. The royal gilding of Damon as a warrior is pretty honest, and it's made more interesting given that his older brother, the one who is so important in his life, perhaps the most important figure in his family, and king, of course, was not one of those people who thought he needed to be seen as a warrior. Viserys didn't care if people knew he wasn't. It was just a simple truth. Viserys, not a warrior. And he had his younger brother Damon to take care of that for both of them. He had enough skill for both of them. At some point in both book and show, though, Damon's personal ambition grew into something less about himself and more about the realm or his family, or, well, we're not entirely sure, to be honest. Excuse me. But something changed him, or in him. He went from a man who wanted the crown for himself to a man willing to die for the future of humankind. We'll spend a bit of time on his earliest years to get a better handle on the full picture of the man called the Rogue Prince, the king's brother, the prince of the city, the lord of Flea Bottom. He had a lot of names. These Targaryens always have long names, don't they? The title of this episode is The Dreams of Daemon, and we mean dreams in a broad sense. Yes, of course, we refer to what he saw while asleep or partly asleep, waking dreams. We won't, that's a little tricky, but you know what I mean. At Harrenhal, those dreams of past and future, and the accompanying supernatural implications. But we also refer to his ambitions as in what he dreamt for himself, what he envisioned for his own future, and how that changed when the former informed the latter, when Daemon's dreams came into contact with, if not merged with, the dreams of a power greater than himself. And to help us dive deeper and more thoroughly into this topic, we've got a special guest. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. We're here with another episode of History of Westeros podcast, and we're excited to be here with you today. It's so much fun going through the lore of George R. R. Martin's world and the accompanying TV shows, even if they don't always get along. We're not here to talk about that today, but we will at some point. I know a lot of you might be aware of that drama, but we're not going to talk about it just yet. We've got actual content. And to help us with that, we've got our new guest, not new on the scene, but new on History of Westeros podcast. Welcome, Quinn the GM. How's it going, man?
Hello, great. Thank you for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Great to be here.
That's great.
Yeah, excited to talk about Damon. He was an interesting character this season of House of the Dragon, and a controversial one at points, at least for like the common viewer. I know my dad wasn't a huge fan of him sitting in Harrenhal for so long, but I loved it.
I did too. I'm glad you did. So we'll be mostly positive about it, but we do acknowledge that not everybody loved it. But maybe we'll make you love it a little more if you didn't love it as much as we did, or maybe we'll give you some more things to think about at the very least. And Quinn will also point out some of places to catch you. I know you're on YouTube. Is there anywhere else to find you? Obviously, you're on Twitter and.
Yeah, so I'm on YouTube on my own name. I have a Twitter also by my name, and I have posted two TikToks.
Nice.
It's not a format I'm the most familiar with, but I have that too.
It's a whole other world. Cool. And your name, the origin of your name, is that Game Master? You have done a lot of game mastering in your days?
So yeah, the origin of it was that I kind of started this as a D&D channel originally.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I talked about game design and like just general TTRPG things, writing, that sort of thing. And then during season 1 of House of the Dragon, I just made a video on like why I thought Viserys II was the best Targaryen king, and people liked it more than anything else I made. So I just started talking about my favorite book series instead.
That's a great place to start. Viserys II. Yeah, that's not the most well-known. People on this show know Viserys II, but yeah, out there in the general fandom, they're like, wait, which one was he? Is that Dany's brother? No, no, but...
Good job, Aziz, guessing Game Master, because I think most fans would guess Grand Maester.
Grand Maester.
I've heard both. I've heard George Martin.
Quinn the General Motors. Yes, you're a car guy.
I've been called Goat Master.
Goat Master. Wow. Yeah, I guess that's kind of fun. You just never, maybe from now on, you should just never tell people. It's like, no, I don't.
That's what I've been doing.
It stands for what you want it to stand for, like you're an author. That's your headcanon. Well, for you, those of you checking us out live, feel free to put your questions or comments here in the chat. And if you're catching this after the fact, feel free to send us questions at westeroshistory@gmail.com or any other way you can contact us, whether it's on Patreon, on X, on Facebook, you name it. And we will see it and most likely respond. So what we're going to do is, like I said, cover both Daemon's sort of mundane ambitions, if you want to call it that, and his dreams that were, of course, very tied together. And, of course, there's a lot of other things that are going to come up along the way. Daemon's own dreams, his early life, his loss of status, his time as king of the Stepstones, then his time in exile, his time married to Rhaenyra, his time coming back to court and slowly weeding his way in. Neither of those are really the correct word. Getting into the good graces of Rhaenyra. Then they're falling out at the end of the season.
I think is the word you wanted.
What's that?
Wheedling.
Wheedling. Wheedling.
That's
okay.
the word you were right in the intersection of.
Yes, or Weedising, like the band. You know, we're just a Targaryen dirtbag, baby. So then Damon choking Rhaenyra, which was a huge moment. Obviously, it's a huge moment, like, for a lot of reasons, but for us, for our purposes, it was another reason why Rhaenyra couldn't trust Damon with the same thing Viserys couldn't trust Damon with, which was the prophecy. And in the second half of the episode, we'll go through each of the episodes, each of his dreams, and then talk about them as a whole, because I think individually they're interesting, but as a whole, they're even more interesting. And then we'll finish with the big weirwood tree dream, which really flipped his script and all that. Lady Lazara Dajo sends a super chat and says, hey, Lady Lazara Dajo, good to see you here live with us today. And let's get to it. So yeah, of course there's a fuller backstory for Damon. This is not a comprehensive backstory, but it is the selective parts of his backstory that fit the topic we're dealing with today. He's an extremely martial person from very early, and it fit because it's true, Quinn, very often that the role of a second, if not third, fourth, fifth son is to be a warrior. Like, the first one's kind of the only one who's ever taught to be an administrator or a ruler, even though sometimes, despite the commonality of people dying in this world, Ned Stark was raised as a second son and became the Lord, etc. Damon, of course, didn't become king. His brother lived a very long time, but he's in a lot of ways the quintessential second son, isn't he?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of compounded insofar as, like, he is the second son of a second son. When he was growing up, he wasn't, like, in line to the throne as closely, given that it was Aemond first. I think he was a kid for a while when Aemond was alive, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that probably influenced things as well. But it is a very defining characteristic throughout just Fire and Blood and the main series. And I think that probably the showrunners House of the Dragon are jealous that Game of Thrones got to that title first.
Nice. Very, very true. Yeah. And because he's a second son and was so good a fit at it, and as you say, second son of a second son, that's a great point. And he learned to solve problems with the sword, which became a problem pretty much the moment he became Rhaenyra's wife, or husband, sorry, and became a bigger problem once the war broke out. So, and that's a big part of what we'll be looking at today, or at least the conclusion. It's a thing that happened, is that he starts to learn how to solve problems in ways that aren't just overbearing or authoritative or, threatening. But he also grew up in a time where a lot of Targaryens died. Death was everywhere. His mother died when he was young. Of course, we mentioned he's the second son of a second son. Aemond died. I think that was in the year like 89 or 90. So Damon would have been about 6 or 7. Yeah. So fairly young. And then his father dies when he's 18. His grandmother died fairly young. Neither of his grandparents, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, made it to even age 65, which they ruled for a long time, but they didn't exactly make it to old age. I mean, honestly, not a lot of Targaryens do. Maester Aemon's a real exception. We don't know how long Vagon lived. He's another one that maybe lived a long time. But yeah, honestly, are there any Targaryens that made it past 70 except for Aemon? It's hard to.
Sarah's also a question mark.
That's a good point. Yeah,
and it's a weird point in Targaryen history when all of these deaths are happening, but other than Aemon, they're all peaceful deaths. There's no deaths in war, deaths by violence.
That's a good point.
Which I think it seems like is something that Damon kind of craves, at least based on some of his actions in the stepstones.
Good point.
So
good point.
Point of frustration.
Something to let that out, or maybe deal with some of that in a way that was more physical rather than processing it mentally or dealing with that kind of trauma another way. And of course, the death of Jaehaerys the death of Balon was the big moment because it set Viserys up to be king, and then not long after, he actually did become king. And I see you have a note about Dark Sister here. That's pretty cool, right? That really did kind of make him stand out. This was an era where there were more Targaryens than perhaps ever, and he was kind of at the top of the heap in terms of, not in rank, though he wanted that, but in terms of being a warrior.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting that kind of becomes one of the symbols of legitimacy, because at this point there are so many dragons that everybody's got one. That's not that big of a deal, but there is realistically only one sword that Jaehaerys can pass down without passing the kingship in itself, which is kind of Blackfire at this point. He can give Dark Sister, which has significance to Jaehaerys as well, as when Jaehaerys' claim started during Maegor's reign, I think he only had Dark Sister because I think he'd stolen it from Dragonstone.
Alyssa.
Audiobook reread is serving me.
You're right. Yeah, Alyssa ran off with it when Visenya died. When Maegor's confusion was unfolding there, he really missed Visenya, didn't he? So, if it wasn't clear already, this is a hybrid book show content. Obviously, the dreams at Harrenhal aren't book content, but as I've said throughout the season, Book Damon does change from an ambitious, somewhat self-serving guy to someone that is willing to die for the cause. Now, why he chooses to die maybe isn't supernatural, but there are certainly those elements are there. Anyway, regardless, we'll get to that, but that is an important distinction to lay out here. Book Viserys never gave Damon Dragonstone, and neither did show Viserys give him Dragonstone, but he kind of took it. After he was exiled, he just kind of went there. But he grew up thinking he was the heir because, Viserys didn't have a son. Then when he had one, it was, heir for a day. And no one really thought of Rhaenyra as ahead of him. Viserys never treated Rhaenyra as his heir until he named her that. And that was obviously much later. But I think Damon, this is one of the first things I think Damon misperceived. I think Damon expected to be king because, he's his brother's heir. Viserys expected to have a son. This was a huge point of episode 1, season 1. And it wasn't just that he expected it. He dreamt it. He had this dream that he was going to have a son. And that it's not clear whether Damon knew about this dream, but if he did, it would annoy him because he already was annoyed by prophecy. And if he's like, you had a dream you were going to replace me with some kid? Damon's already hated all this stuff. So finding that out would have just annoyed him even more. Do you think he knew about that or how do you think he would have reacted to that?
I was thinking about that. My money would be on him knowing about it, in that Viserys, at least to me in the show, seems like the type of guy who's going to just start talking about that, given that we see him tell both of his wives about that, I think, his first in episode 1 and the second in episode 3.
Yes.
But I think that I'm not sure how Damon would have. I think he probably would have just dismissed it just out of hand as just kind of his brother's dreams of importance to some degree. But I think given the fact that Viserys is so much less of a capable martial figure, I think Damon just would have thought that is further weakness on his brother's part. And he should be able to shore it up.
I think you're probably right. That's where I lean too, because Damon certainly knew his brother was into that sort of thing. He doesn't always name specifics, but it was something that comes up more than once or twice. He's just like, my brother and his dreams. And I love now looking back on it that became so important. It was one of the first lines we ever heard from the show was dreams didn't make us dragons, or dreams didn't make us dragons. Dream didn't make us kings, dragons did. And that was one of the first lines we ever heard from the show, like 6 months before season 1. And I was like, well, actually, it didn't ultimately become that important in season 1. It mattered, but it became more important in season 2. And it's like now in retro, it's like actually that line was damn huge. It explains a lot about how Damon feels about how his brother viewed the succession and him personally as worthy and whether he loved him or not. Because Damon got confused about a lot of these things, as we know. So it's not clear where Damon originally got his scorn for the supernatural. Like we aren't given an inkling as to how that started, but I bet it's rooted in all this, like his scorn for it, his maybe lack of understanding of it, or maybe he just doesn't like it because it's not tangible, and he's such a warrior guy that, show me things I can kill and stick my sword in, and, magic is just, he doesn't like it. It's part of why he has a disbelief, is it's a willful disbelief. Is that kind of how it comes off, isn't it?
I think so, and especially given that he is this figure who's at least presented and seems to be like kind of a true master of the more direct elements of Targaryen magic and power with his magic sword. He has a dragon. He's a great warrior. I think he probably just views it as unnecessary at this point. I think that to an extent, like, he is always grasping, he's always wanting for more, but his era in which he's grown up is characterized by security, like pretty much no other era in Targaryen history. So I think that he probably views prophecy as just something, if it exists, it's an unnecessary relic of what's gone before.
Yeah. So he may have also, on top of all that, in perhaps his mistaken belief that he deserved to be heir, that he would be heir based on the circumstances that played out with Viserys' lack of son, and just had been that for so long, he may have gotten a little used to it, like gotten accustomed to the idea and sort of expected, it's going to be me. And in the show, we see people like Mysaria, like, reinforcing that belief, kind of propping him up, like, maybe not in a healthy way, but they were certainly doing it. And that's implied to be a thing in the books as well, with his lick spittles and the heir for the day comment obviously is in the book. And so that's the thing that comes to a head in episode 1. By the way, that episode 1, season 1 just has so much in it. Every time I was talking about this episode and writing this outline and all the subtopics, it was like, goes right back to that first episode. So many things touch back on that. Good job, show. So the heir for a day comment is enough. Like, that's enough for Viserys to remove Damon as heir, but it's implied with a deleted scene and perhaps more that Viserys was already having doubts. Like, the heir for a day comment was the last straw, but Damon's lack of belief in the prophecy would have absolutely been a huge problem given how big a deal it was to Viserys. Like, how can I pass the throne to you if you don't believe in this stuff that I hold dear, that is like paramount to everything? So what do you think about that? Like, there was a deleted scene where they actually addressed this, wasn't there?
I hadn't heard about that. What is the deleted scene?
Well, there was apparently a deleted, I don't know if it was a deleted scene or a planned scene. I don't know if it was actually filmed. That Viserys and Damon were going to talk about the prophecy, and just to add to, just to show his scorn, maybe to make it a little more clear. I think they,
was that one of the things in the scripts that we saw so whether it was filmed, but it was in the written script.
Yeah, I don't think it was filmed. Yeah. So be clear that I don't think they ever filmed it. But yeah, they initially planned, and I think they just realized that they had enough to show Damon's scorn of that. Yeah. And it was already enough going on in that episode. But that certainly would have really set the tone earlier on that. I don't know that. I think it's fine that they cut it, but it would have certainly been different.
I agree. I think there was kind of enough as is, but it could have been cool to have that like through line with the season, like episode 1, episode 10. But I think it was fine as is.
Yeah. So in book and show, Mysaria, there was some slight differences there, but it basically the difference being he lied about getting her pregnant in the show and actually did get her pregnant in the book, but she lost the child at sea, which was a big problem for both of them. They both were mad at Viserys over that, but not so much in the show. She's never really had a problem with Viserys in the show. She is very mad at the Hightowers in the show, but we're not here to talk about the dreams of Mysaria. So he goes off to become king of the Stepstones. Now the timeline's a little different book and show, but it's not something we really need to get into. He wins the Stepstones, gives them to Viserys. That's the short version. They're reconciled. He's welcomed back to the small council for a while in the book as well. And in both, he's a little cold to Alicent because her children are pushing him down farther down the line of succession. It's very straightforward in Fire and Blood that that's the case, and it's pretty obvious in the show that that's the case. I don't think he ever comes out and says it, but I mean, he wanted the throne, and now he's farther down. It's pretty straightforward. But the actual way that he does this is different, right? The way he plays out in the war, the way he manages himself as King of the Stepstones, it's a very different. It's almost like where he belongs. It's like, well, this is where I can just solve problems with the sword, and it's very telling though when he's about to get help. And he doesn't want help, but the help is coming, and he beats the guard up, and it's like, man, that really says a lot about his character. Like, he can't solve this problem, but he still just resorts to he's just angry and goes violent. It really said a lot, didn't it?
It did. And I think that whole scene that follows the beating the guard, at least to me, speaks further to kind of this distaste or even resentment towards magic, in that, like, we have seen that the crab feeder is using these tactics to avoid the dragons in this conflict, and instead of like kind of waiting or figuring out a more safe strategy, he just goes in on his own and wants to like prove himself and his skills in a fully just boots on the ground capacity. No dragon, no nothing. And it shows, I think, that he just at his core really wants to prove himself, and it almost shows at this point like he doesn't want to care about magic necessarily. He wants to be his own person, regardless of like, yes, he has a dragon, but he can still do this without it.
I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he doesn't need that crutch, just like he doesn't need his brother, just like he doesn't need anyone. Well, I mean, he kind of does, but that's his belief that's what he wants to project, that he doesn't need anybody else. And there's a little bit of Aegon the Conqueror in that, I think, too, where Aegon just, most of the conquest, if not all of it, was straightforward. He wasn't cunning. He wasn't like, let's trick them into this, that. And like, no, we'll hit them head on. I'm going to go after the biggest, baddest king in Westeros first thing. And I think Damon has a lot of that attitude. Like his bravery is almost insane. And that's almost like not bravery. It's almost just like madness. But I think it's that part of it is he's so proud and so wants to prove himself that it just absolutely trumps any like fear of death that he would have, and partly backed up by his own, view of himself, which is maybe too healthy, you might say, but certainly supreme. So after, of course, he coming back to court, he spends some time mostly flirting with Rhaenyra and grooming her, you could say. It's a different kind of grooming because it's not sexual grooming, it's power grooming. That's not like I'm not like defending it, I'm just saying. And in both book and show, this comes to a head. Viserys and Damon have a falling out. Definitely it's over Rhaenyra in the show. It's heavily suggested that's what it is in the book. It's pretty much my headcanon. And he just goes right, in the book, he just goes right back to the stepstones and keeps on fighting. In the show, he does not. He goes to kill Rhea Royce in the show. But in the book, she just dies while he's there. And this is, they basically kept this part of his ambition while changing it around a little bit. He kills Rhea in the show, doesn't kill her in the book, but in the book, he kills Laenor, or they conspire to kill Laenor. It's not entirely clear. And in the show, well, he kills some random guard. We don't know who that body was, but someone did die. I like to hope that it was some awful criminal that they did that to instead of just some poor rando.
You don't think that Damon could have just hired someone to kill Rhea still? Like, they didn't kill her by hand.
Oh, it's possible.
I don't know. I wouldn't say I think he didn't kill Rhea in the book.
It's possible. It's just not hinted at at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
other than that, it benefits him greatly for his wife to die.
You could see why he did it.
You can see why he would want her
or
dead
would want to.
Point.
Yes.
But no, I don't think he killed her by hand. I think he could have gotten the services of someone.
Yeah. What do you think, Quinn, about that and in general here?
Yeah, I think they're definitely, it lines up with the character in the book to have done that, though there is no direct evidence to it. I was just thinking that, like you mentioned, it's a slightly changed like order of operations from book to show, and it does create kind of a weird thing where like he shows up to Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding, but like is still in exile or leaves and goes into exile again right after that with Laena this time, which is strange because like I mean he doesn't see Viserys or Rhaenyra again until her funeral. And it's strange that he leaves, kills his wife, comes back, and then leaves again, but not formally exiled this time. I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's just Viserys being kind of soft, right? He just refused to like formally. He didn't really exile him. He just made him leave. And this is the same man that's like, oh, he's different now. He's had kids. Bring him on back, you know? So yeah, I think Damon just knew his brother and knew he could get away with that. He's like, he's not going to do anything to me. He's not going to harm me. He might yell at me, but that's as far as he'll go. And he's right. Like, yeah, Viserys would probably not have gone any farther than that.
Well, that's also why I think he could, why he left again, is that he didn't want to press his luck. He was like, I can come back. Viserys will let me do that. But if I try to post up and live here on Dragonstone, like where are they going to live right then? Is he going to live with his in-laws? Is he going to live on Dragonstone? Like, I don't think Viserys would have let that play, so he knew he could come back, but he couldn't stay.
You're right. It never would have lasted anyway, even if he wasn't, even without his designs on Rhaenyra, like, he didn't get along with Alicent and Aegon and Aemond and all them in the book version, and the show version, I doubt they were big fans of each other either. They don't really interact very much, but that would have probably come to a head in the long term. So either way, it's a show. This is ambition in play here. He's either murdering wives or husbands so he can move up. With Damon and Laena, it's a little bit similar in that there was a deleted / planned scene for Damon and Laena, the suitor, like how he kills the Sea Lord. He taunts the Sea Lord's son until he duels him and then kills him. So a little more upfront about his ambition this time. It's not a murder. He just tricked a guy into getting himself killed. It's it's not really that different. But Viserys hadn't consented to this marriage. So he marries Laena. Obviously, Corlys is on board. He was right there for it. So they're like, they don't push their luck here. They go to Essos. They stay there for a while. They let things die down, laying low. Not really laying low Essos style, but laying low as far as Westeros is going. And then, yeah, they have their twins, and that's where they kind of realigns with the show, because basically in the show, they're just at Pentos the whole time. And in the book, they tour around the free cities. Not a big difference. But when the twins are born, eventually the show frames it as Laena has never really been that happy living in Pentos. She's like, why aren't we part of the family? Let's go live in Westeros. Like, I want my daughters to know they're other members of their family. They should know, Corlys and Rhaenys and Rhaenyra and Viserys and all that. And he doesn't want to because of all his issues with his family. So this is important because I think some people wonder why he has guilt over Laena, and some people might think, oh, it's because she died trying to bear his child. Well, I'm sure he feels bad about that. But before that, he felt bad about not giving them the life that she wanted. She made them live with his exile that they never wanted and didn't deserve. And as we just pointed out, it was somewhat self-imposed. No one forced him to leave, right? He could have just come back probably, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I do kind of like the one change that you mentioned from the book, them kind of just staying in Pentos. I think that makes the connection there a little bit stronger, and it makes sense they wouldn't want to move with infants all that much. And I do think it kind of lends more credence to the thought that there would be enough of a bond between like Rhaenyra's branch of the family and the nobles in Pentos to send her children there, which we see at the end of season 2.
Yeah. So he does does return, and they are temporarily reconciled again, and that's when Jace and Luke get betrothed to Baela and Rain. It looks really good. It's the early formation of the Black faction, basically. But they still go back to Pentos, and Laena dies in childbirth / Dragonfire, and that, of course, is a huge milestone in the show, the books, and particularly Daemon's arc. So without a direct line to the throne, Daemon then moves on to setting his target on the one who supplanted him. If he can't be the king, he can marry the person that's going to take the throne. That option became more and more appealing to him, and it was always there, like, as we know, ever since the beginning. He saw this option ever since Rhaenyra was a child. Like, I think that's part of why he was so friendly with her. Again, the whole grooming thing, the power grooming thing. Is that kind of how you read it too? You think maybe there was a little more to it? I mean, it seems like they genuinely get along, and obviously their marital issues aside, they did have a friendship before it got, incesty.
I think it was definitely an element of it. I think that it definitely wasn't the whole thing, given that we do see those scenes between them or maybe it's just the one scene in the first episode where they have that conversation in the throne room before Rhaenyra's made heir. So there is that bond there as well. I think he sees her as kind of cut from the same cloth, at least in terms of like maybe being more capable than her father and maybe a bit more like him, which weird. But I do think that's definitely an element of it in terms of getting closer to power, in terms of at least the advancements we see in their relationship in like episodes 4 and 7.
And I wonder something else here. In the book, it's not clear how he saw Rhaenyra, whether he saw her as a puppet, something he could wield power through. But I suspect he did, because book Rhaenyra is a lot weaker in terms of her level of authority. She has a long time sidelined in the book with recovering from Luke's death and Visenya's pregnancy and death, and then just is kind of wilts under the pressure of a lot of things in ways that I don't think book Rhaenyra will. I think she'll struggle with some of these things.
Show Rhaenyra will.
I'm sorry, show Rhaenyra will, not book Rhaenyra, yeah. So I wonder if we can imply some of the same thing, that book Damon saw that weakness and was like, yeah, this is part of how I can wield power through this puppet. Now, maybe he underestimated her. In the show, he definitely underestimated her, if that's the case. But he still has a lot of that anger about it, because he thinks that her legitimacy is based on his issues with his brother, like the reasons they fought. Like his brother, Viserys was afraid of me, or he didn't love me enough. Damon's completely wrong about these things, but he's very convinced he's right. And this is a big part of course, their conflict that is brewing at this point and comes to a head at the end of season 1. So it was easy for him to charm her. He was very famous already, like the dashing dragon rider, like the things that were said in his dream with his mother are kind of like a lot of was kind of what his reputation kind of was, toned down a bit. No one was saying that Viserys lacked the stamina for the throne, but they were saying that he was a great swordsman and dragon rider and those kind of things. So lots of time passes. Viserys continues to rule passively. Damon and Rhaenyra have 3 children. That's significant. And, 2 children, and then 1 passes. And this is, of course, the death of that 3rd child is the big part of what really brings the rest of this to a head. Because when Visenya dies, Damon is not at her side. He's not a husband. He's immediately goes to the sword. He tries to solve the problem with the sword. He calls a war council. He goes and visits Vermithor. Like, he's at Vermithor's side instead of his wife's. What the heck is that, right?
I do have a thought on that specifically with the timing of the Vermithor visit, in that, like, it happens, at least for us, right after the conversation with Rhaenyra about the prophecy. But I think it's kind of Damon trying to grasp on to the other side of that Targaryen power, the kind that he's, like, always had this kind of mastery over. He feels out of control in terms of not knowing about this prophecy, and it's like been his brother's driving motivation for this entire time. And even when he's styled himself as Viserys' heir, he was never given this kind of level of knowledge, and I imagine it just makes him feel powerless, and I think that's probably the worst thing for Damon to feel.
Yeah, you're right. He hates that, and it brings up his personal feelings on his brother not accepting him or loving him or whatever swirl of emotions he's feeling there. It isn't always consistent, perhaps, or logical, but that's emotions for you, especially emotions that you've had since childhood. And yeah, so he explodes in rage when Rhaenyra just casually brings this, like, the dream, the prophecy, right? You know about that. And he's like, he melts down. I love that you connected that to going to Vermithor, because I think that's a very good take on that scene, that she brings up this thing that he can't understand, that he's confused by, that is also wrapped up in why he thinks he was maybe set aside for the throne. So he goes and takes stock of the part that he is more tangible to him. I like that take quite a lot. So Rhaenyra didn't see it coming at all. She was I think a lot of us didn't either. Like, oh my God, Damon just choked Rhaenyra. What the heck? Damon
might not be a great dude.
I can excuse murder, but I draw the line at.
I mean, I think that was Rhaenyra, though. She could excuse murder, and she did draw the line at choking her.
That's true.
Rightfully so, but like they murdered a man.
They
like,
did
together.
murder.
They murdered someone.
They did some murders together, yeah.
Like that guy, I didn't really deserve to die. I don't think.
That's why I'm saying. Hopefully he did. Hopefully that was some awful criminal that they dug out of.
He was already like
cells.
sentenced to be executed.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah, it's like the Davos thing, right? Like Manderley didn't kill some poor innocent man. He's like, give me a real criminal and we'll make him look like Davos, you know? I know we've got one down there. This is a whole city, you know? So she was completely surprised by that. But apart from the spousal abuse, which is a big deal and a reason for any wife to not trust their husband, as king and queen, she now can't trust him to carry forth this legacy that is the reason she was chosen to be queen. She's like, well, my father chose me because I believe in the prophecy, and partly because you don't believe in the prophecy. It's both a negative and a positive reason. It's like, well, I chose Rhaenyra because you don't believe in the prophecy. I chose Rhaenyra because you do believe in the prophecy, right? It's both. So it's really important to her because it was a big part of the reason why she was chosen. So what is she supposed to do? Like, he chokes her the second he even brings it up. Like, how is she supposed to broach that subject again? And then he goes off and kills Jaehaerys with blood and cheese. So it's just like the rogue prince has truly gone rogue. Like, he's rogue prince before he marries her, but he's far more rogue at this point, I think. Arguably.
I agree.
The rogue king consort.
There's one, I rewatched the scene of their fight in episode 2 of season 2, like I think it was a couple days ago, and Rhaenyra had like, I think one of my favorite lines of the season that I'd forgotten about, which was like something to the effect of like, you'd used me as an excuse to wield the darkness you keep sheathed inside you like a blade.
Ooh, good one.
Bars to, I think Sarah Hess wrote that, but I don't know. It really shows how the dynamic has kind of just been shifted by that. And there was the like brief episode 1 where it seemed like things were at least semi back to how they had been, just given that the death of Luke was so much at the fore. But with that domestic incident and then the death of Jaehaerys, I think that it's just a real coming to terms for Rhaenyra of like who she actually married.
Yeah, and it becomes a real problem. And it's interesting too because she later tells Jace about the prophecy, and it comes at a key moment during Damon's dreams as well. Obviously, it comes in episode 4. And she says that she wouldn't even be fighting for the throne if not for the prophecy. So I point that out to just remind ourselves of just how important that reasoning is to her, and which in turn creates an enormous rift here that Damon, hates it and doesn't even believe in it and gets violent over the mention of it. Now, as an aside, I think this might be a little Stannis-y, like, oh, it's my duty to take the throne, Rhaenyra maybe is a little pushing that angle a little hard, but that's another story, and I still find it compelling. I'm not complaining, just saying, Rhaenyra, how much do you really believe that, or is it, Anyway, but I think she does believe it to a certain point, for sure, but there's a little more to it.
I also think that belief probably grows as the season goes on as well, because we see her kind of on her own, drinking her own Kool-Aid arc throughout the later half.
Yep, you're right. She does grow more and more into it, and Mazzaria encourages that. So I think it's only going to grow more. I think good guy Rhaenyra is going to fade pretty quickly in season 3. She's already fading. I mean, that look, episode 7, and the casual suggestion of burning Lannisport and Old Town.
Who hasn't suggested that?
Those aren't good guy things. Yeah, it was just a suggestion, right? Okay, so I think that's most of what we wanted to cover for the setup. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll talk about the meat of the story, the dreams themselves, and how all this framing, how all this setup plays out through these dreams, and how it's all very, very tied together. So we all have our favorites. Do you have a favorite dragon, Quinn? Mine's Caraxes. I've talked about that. Do you have a favorite amongst the...
So I'm in two minds of this. I kind of owe my channel to Vhagar because I think the video that's I think still the most viewed thing I've done was about Aemond and Vhagar.
Nice.
But just from reading the books and throughout the entirety of before even having a channel, it was always Tessarion. I love Tessarion.
Ooh, so you've only gotten a little glimpse. You're looking forward to some.
Mm-hmm. I was so excited to see her in this finale. But no, because that's the thing. I don't want to spoil too much of future stuff.
It's okay. Spoilers are fine in this one.
Okay, I was gonna say it, like Tumbleton alone is just like, it's just impressive that like a dragon that small is able to. I think she essentially cleans it up, right? Like,
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, that she grows fast. She got some Meraxes and some Drogon going there, I think. Quick growing dragon.
She did look a lot like Drogon in the last shot there, like Drogon circa season 5.
Yeah, the red hue of the wings.
I'm glad they got that, like the pink wing membranes were like such a cool detail.
I agree.
I like the visual on that.
I agree. Yeah. So I've been studying the ingredients of Magic Mind, the mental performance shot that we've been using for quite a while now. And I have a favorite ingredient, which is not a phrase I ever thought I would say. Favorite ingredient. Usually it's like, well, is it sugar? No. Caffeine? No, it's not. It's Bacopa Monnieri. And the reason I like it so much is because it is a herb that there is some misinformation about it out there. If you look it up, you'll find some claims that aren't true. But it has gone through systematic reviews. It's systematic analysis, the highest, most rigorous level of testing and analysis, which costs money and time. Not every substance on this planet has been tested that thoroughly. So I appreciate the ones that have gone through that rigorous testing. And it has been proven definitively to improve cognition and memory if you use it consistently. And that is a good reason, I think, to consider it my favorite ingredient in Magic Mind, the mental performance shot, which you can get by going to magicmind.com/VIPHOW20. That's VIPHOW20. Very important person, History of Westeros. That's what that stands for. And you get 20% off for one-time purchases and subscriptions. We've heard from several of you that Magic Mind has been working out very well.
Can I give you my favorite response?
You should.
I got a message from someone who bought it and and she DM'd me and said, "What is in Magic Mind? This stuff whips!" Question mark, question mark, question mark. I just loved that. I was like, she's not wrong, but it really made me laugh.
I've heard of people saying something slaps or whatever. Whips. I don't know if I've ever heard whips before, but
you're not up on the.
I'm just not up on the lingo.
It's a slang word. Yeah.
Neither am I, apparently.
But the meaning is clear. Yes, it whips you into shape. Like some Devo, right? So you can have your experience with Bacopa Monnieri and see how it works out for you if you subscribe to Magic Mind using VIPHOW20 and take it every day in the morning. I drink it straight as a shot. Shay likes to mix it with her juice. We all do it differently. And I'm curious to hear how it works out for you if you do get on that trip. But let's get back to it. Damon's given dream. So the first we went through his sort of chosen dreams, and these are the ones that were given to him. And now let's start with that. Is that how you see it? There's a lot of evidence that Alice was sort of steering him through this. Like, she knew what was going on in some of the dreams very specifically. So there was an engineering of sorts here. What do you think about that? And what do you think the point? Why are they steering him in particular?
I think it's a question of like who is in control of Harrenhal at that moment. I think that says a lot, and it would make sense insofar as like we've had characters in the main series like be at Harrenhal but haven't been like this tormented to this extent.
Right.
I think the bed being made of weirwood like says something like big to me insofar as like it's probably whoever is like the actual lord at that point. So I imagine Bonifer Hasty is not having a great time at present. But, I think that is quite telling, and I think Alice might not be as like I don't think she's the driver. I think she's steering, but I think she's just kind of directing this force that is already there by way of the weirwoods.
That's kind of how I tend to see it too, because I think she is sort of a missing link. Like, yeah, you look at like Arya or Jaime. Now with Arya, you could easily just say, well, Arya's a 10-year-old kid. 9. What is she? What guilt and what does she have? She just doesn't feel guilty about all her past relationships and her. Yeah, like she doesn't have those, right? And with like someone like Vargo Hoat, like he did seem to be dreaming. Like he seemed to have. I mean, it may have been fever dreams, but that dude went mad
or something.
Yeah, Brienne bit his ear off and.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, good job, Brienne. Well done. She was steering the dreams in his instead of Al. She's this different version of Alice Rivers. Yeah. So, and it's also given we can see this because Damon didn't have these dreams at Dragonstone or King's Landing. They only came at Harrenhal. So you can just by looking at his example, it's pretty telling. So they begin in episode 3. They occur every episode until the 8th, where it switches into more of a vision instead of a dream. Now, that's semantics, but you all saw the show. You know what I'm talking about. There definitely is a difference there. So let's start with episode 3. Soldiers marching by the door, then banging on it. The soldiers marching under his door thing happened a few times. He grabs Dark Sister and goes to check it out, because this is Damon. He doesn't back down. He's not afraid. Even if there's 1,000 soldiers out there, he's going to go check it out. And he hears singing, haunting and singing in a dream in a haunted place is always creepy. That always works. That's always a cool thing to do.
That's helped too.
Yeah. And then he shows up and it's young Rhaenyra sewing Prince Jaehaerys' neck up. And it's like, oh, Millie Alcock, that's young Rhaenyra. He's shocked. He looks guilty. And it's maybe the first time he's ever looked like that in the entire show, but it happens more times throughout these dreams. She accuses him of coming and going and leaving her to clean up the mess, which he literally had just done, right? He just fled after their argument, and she's dealing with the fallout of Blood and Cheese. So, yeah, I mean, fair accusation. And it does, but it goes back farther than that, doesn't it? This isn't just about him leaving then. It was all this, like, semi-exile or running off to Dragonstone when it's not his, or just going off to the stepstones, you know, just this is kind of how he's been. He doesn't, when he can't solve his problems by the sword, he runs off and goes and fights somebody else. And
it's not fight or flight for him. It's more often fight than flight.
Fight and more fight after the flight. Yes. The flight on his dragon.
With this vision specifically, it's been my thought, like, since these episodes aired, that, like, I think the showrunners are just really proud of the Jaehaerys head prop, because, like, it's a big focus last episode. It's a big focus this episode. It's in the intro. I think they like it a lot.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, they do like that. They love their dead baby. No, never mind. So he comes to in the Godswood, and Alice just has her first line. "You will die in this place," and he's like, "You don't say." And we're like, book readers are like, "You don't say." Yeah. And Dark Sister's already just leaning there on the roots. I thought that was a nice touch to have the sword. Just, he had already put it down, like as if he was like entranced by the tree, and it's where he ends up at the end of the season, and he cuts Willem Blackwood's head off. I don't know. It's like vaguely foreshadowing, but I feel like there's more to that scene that I wasn't able to get to and explain, and I'm still haven't figured out what to say about it, you know, even now.
I think the big thing with that scene is I think it's largely obviously foreshadowing and setup, but I think it's designed to, I think, probably mirror something that's going to happen next season. I think that I imagine once they hit the water, maybe like it's said that his body's never seen. So my thought was always maybe he goes to Isle of Faces, maybe he goes here to where he's having this vision, and maybe there'd be attention drawn to like Dark Sister isn't there at that point because we know where it is and where it's later discovered. So
interesting.
I was thinking that he's gonna have a long stretch of time with that tree just scratching. Are we
gonna get the 13 marks,
marking it up? So like it kind of mirrors that to me as well, like setting the sword down versus taking it out on the weirwood.
I like
perhaps?
it. Yeah, I like it. So,
do you think we'll get the Isle of Faces at some point?
I don't want to hope for that. I really want it, but I don't want to hope for it. Because
I want it, but I think what we would be more likely to get is like for Adam to talk about how, like, for him to go and for us to see it like off screen.
Ooh.
Like I think Adam could still go, but maybe we don't follow Adam there. You know what I mean?
I think there's another point in favor of that reading of it, insofar as like I think there's very little in this show that Martin would want to deliberately obscure for future book stuff.
Yeah,
I could see the Isle of Faces being one of those things.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Just for that purpose, maybe revealing very little.
That said, if there are hostilities, maybe they'll show it anyway.
Yeah, right. That one's funny because he can't complain about the dream stuff because that came from him. You know, like obviously they ran with it, but like I think some people forget that. You know, like no, George actually told them about this. This was his idea. So anyway, important to note that Damon still hasn't had the beverage yet. He has this first dream. The set of dreams. I guess there's 3 different things that happen in maybe one dream, and not quite even into the next episode either. So let's start with that. The first scene of episode 4, the Rook's Rest episode, actually begins with young Rhaenyra, again Millie Alcock, on the throne, speaking High Valyrian. And at first, Damon can't make out what she's saying, but here is Ashea. Read the quote, please.
Lucky me, you didn't make me read it in High Valyrian.
Yeah, I was about to.
You were muted, Aziz. I unmuted you. You created me, Damon, yet now you are set on destroying me, all because your brother loved me more than he did you.
Not exactly, Damon. And really, that's his daughter. Like, of course he loves his daughter more than his brother. Like, that's most fathers, right? Like 98% or maybe 99, I don't know. A very overwhelming percentage, whatever it is. So, and he's also just wrong. It's not because... It's not even because yes, he does love her more than you, but that's not why. He didn't make her queen because of that. It's because you don't accept the prophecy. And because, as Rhaenyra yelled, it's because I can't trust you, Damon, which, yeah, I agree with you, Rhaenyra. You can't trust him. Like, I wouldn't trust him either, given what you've been through. And as a younger person, she was a lot easier to manipulate. She was attracted to him. He was like this big, dashing adult figure in a family where incest isn't a bad thing. So no one, told her not to have that crush or whatever. So yeah, and he ran with it. He's like, oh, she's into me. I can use this. Yeah.
I also feel like the not understanding High Valyrian feels significant to me, and that like. Even at Damon's first scene, he's introduced speaking High Valyrian and sitting on the throne. It's such a symbol of his connection to his culture, and I think that he's feeling that disconnect with not knowing the prophecy. And I think that in episode 4 specifically, that's a big theme, because we see Aemond do pretty much the exact same thing to Aegon with the during the small council meeting.
Good point.
Aegon just doesn't understand it because he's not he doesn't care about learning the language. He can command Sunfire in English, but. I think it's a kind of small little mini theme in the episode.
That's a really good take. I love that. And to continue the theme of Damon just trying to solve problems with the sword, what does he do in this dream when Rhaenyra confronts him and he's like all confused? He cuts her head off, right? It's just like, okay, so the first 2 dreams are of someone whose head he already had cut off, Jaehaerys, and then the next one is cutting the person who accuses him of that, cutting their head off. And the crown hits the ground and rattles. So the look on his face is he's disturbed. He understands that he needed to do something. This is not the way to respond, but this is his only gear. And I think this is what Alice is confronting him with. If we're looking at her as steering his dreams, she's saying, okay, the first thing we need to do is get him to realize that all he ever does is think of the sword, and that's not going to work here. And I like how this is juxtaposed with his trying to solve his Riverlords issues in a similar way. He's like, well, I'm just going to force them. So it doesn't work in the dream world. It doesn't work in the real world. It doesn't work with his family. Like, everything is like Damon. Not everything can be solved with the sword, and it takes a dream or two for that. So this is when it comes around, right? He wakes up and has the blood on his hands. And Simon wakes him up. By the way, that's another thing. Do you think Simon is in on the dream stuff? Because Simon seems to want Damon to succeed. He certainly seemed in on the whole, like, Alice finishing off Grover, which was pretty surprising. But
my personal read of it is Simon isn't directly involved, but he knows there's magic stuff going on and is just choosing not to do or say anything because it's funny.
That's great. I like it. Yeah, Simon was a conundrum throughout the season. And he's one of the very, very few good things about the season being cut short is that we will have him in season 2. Whereas if not,
people are going to be pissed come season 3.
I know he's going to get his head chopped off pretty quickly, and that will be fun.
They've been saving Hightowers. They've been moving book deaths.
That's true.
Maybe dare we hope?
I shan't, but I will. Maybe I'll hope 1%. I'll leave 1% of hope for Simon. So he sees that black goat on the way to Oscar, which again still hasn't had the beverage yet. And I have an interesting observation about the bookending of the black goat. At the end of the episode, or towards the end of the episode. Yeah. So Damon. Go ahead.
No, I'll say that for later.
Okay, cool. All right, so Damon is the next dream he has. He goes to sleep. More marching past his door, the same sort of sounds and colors and all that. And of course, he follows the guy that looks kind of like him, and then realizes it's Damon. This is pretty awesome. He's a man. He's unwilling to face his own guilt. He's unwilling to see how much his nephew is like him, but. It's also a great way to back into this explanation to Damon. Like, Damon doesn't want to be confronted. It's like, you're just so much like Aemond. But if he is brought into this concept, like, from the side, at an angle, like, indirectly, like, you see how bad Aemond is. You've already recognized, you already have a preconceived notion of Aemond. You've been around him. You see what kind of man he is, what kind of man he's turned into. You may not admit yet, Damon, that he's like you, but you see the effect he's had on his family. How a second son with a chip on his shoulder and a huge dragon and all this ambition can screw everything up. Maybe consider that you're the guy on your side of the family that's like that. And you can't just throw that in his face, but if you bring that concept up gradually, maybe he can accept it. I think that's what's happening here. He's following this figure around. He's thinking about who it is. We as the audience are too. And then the moment of reveal, it's him. Like, he is Aemond. I really like that. The more I think about it, the more I like it too. What did you think, Quinn?
I agree. I mean, the gut reaction is like, that's really funny, because that's what I thought, just like seeing the Matt Smith with the eye patch. But I also like the thought that, like, I mean, Aemond would be thrilled if he knew that Damon was having this vision. But I also I think they do a great job with the parallels between the two this season, because I've seen a lot of people, especially on Twitter, I forget exactly who I saw that, but I think Aemond is very much set up as Damon, who is making like the exact opposite choices that Damon made. Like, Damon always he always had these kind of extreme impulses to like seize power for himself. He never acted on any of them.
Yeah, we like to call it a mirror often, because it is mirrored. Yeah. You're right that it is he chooses the opposite. You're right.
Mm-hmm. But with Aemond kind of deliberately making an attempt on Aegon there, that is a bridge that Damon never got near crossing, I don't think, other than maybe choking Rhaenyra, but that didn't seem like it was going to be killing her at any point.
Yeah, that was more of a reaction than something he wanted to, a goal he had. Like, I'm going to kill this woman now because that will make me king. Yeah. Unlike...
That was just him struggling to control himself.
Yeah.
The same as Aemond when he tried to manhandle Helena. He didn't think about what that was. That would never have worked. She's a dragon rider. You can't force a girl onto a dragon
into battle.
It's not going to work. And the same with choking your wife, who's the queen, is also not really going to get you what you want. So I don't know. They were both foolish.
Poor impulse control, unhandled rage. Yeah, and an issue with solving problems in ways other than through violence, which is their lot in life, as we said. Both those two have really been taught that, and then reinforced by, being the writer of Vhagar, and will definitely give you some confidence in life. So yeah, and there are very important differences, like y'all said, like the mirroring, their parallels. You see the connection even when they're opposites, because they're polar opposites in some ways, even though they're the same in some ways. So it certainly suggests manipulation here too, given that this parallel dream is the one that leads him to Alice. He's wandering the halls following his dream self, and he's like, oh, hi, Alice Rivers. Hello. And then this is when she calls herself a barn owl, and he drinks the concoction because he's kind of confused by how unafraid of him she is, and how she's speaking to him like an equal, basically, which he's not used to. And
the Jojen paste.
The Jojen paste, yeah. Like, what is that beverage? That we obviously have probably the same theories about that drink. It was red. She's wearing weirwood leaves. Helena's early visions that were off page, like that were behind the scenes stuff, have an owl in them, and then that, which of course,
I never caught that one.
Right?
That's cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, and then of course that comes around at the end of the season.
When you look at her behind the scenes stuff of like her drawings in her journal and on her bedroom walls, there's some really interesting stuff there. And in the journal, there is a clear drawing of an owl at Harrenhal and some other interesting stuff.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
I've done a video. I did a video on like the behind the scenes drawings, but I think I did that video before she had the barn owl line.
Yes, absolutely. We did see that before she had the barn owl line. You're absolutely correct, because it was one of the ones where, like, a couple weeks later, we were like, "Oh wow!"
Yeah, that's so cool, right? So she knows some of the things that are going on, and it's never entirely clear. Like with the mom dream, she just like says that. So like, well, she had to know about that. That's not a coincidence. But with Rhaenyra, there's something she infers. Like she's like, well, you haven't been sending messages, so that's just being smart, like figuring things out. But she's also in his head, so she reads his actions and she's in his head a bit, and that's kind of neat. Even though because we don't know how far it is, and that's very George R. Martin. That's a recurring thing. He loves to combine mundane underpinnings with supernatural underpinnings to create like it's not a tripod because those are only two things, but to create an anchor or a balancing of reasoning. Like Jaime's weirwood dream is kind of a tripod because it's three things. He's got a fever, it's a weirwood heart stump, and he drank dream wine. So there's that's one of my favorites because it's three instead of two. But the two thing is so common. You know, George gives us the mundane and the supernatural nicely mashed together in a way that is so well done. And the show, I think, handled Harrenhal that way pretty well too. So the first thing he actually sees after the drink is he appears in the meeting with Willem Blackwood and immediately sees Lena as a serving girl. And that's throwing him off because this is, again, he's trying to reject the supernatural. He doesn't feel a lot of guilt. He doesn't admit feeling a lot of guilt. He is feeling a lot of guilt, but he maybe doesn't want to admit it to himself. How's he going to frame this? In his mind, the supernatural is farther down the list of possibilities. So he's like, well, but I'm seeing this ghost, but it's not a ghost because I don't believe in that. But so he has to face it one way or the other. Either it's some guilt or something unprocessed, or he's really seeing the supernatural, and that to him, that's the lesser option. So it must really be confusing. I mean, as an audience, it was a little confusing too, because we're like, well, how did he get in this room and what's going on? But it's even more confusing for him.
For me, it's just forever going to be confusing for Damon to drink this really suspicious drink, have all of these visions, and not once, like, really think Alice did this to him.
You did it to me.
Yeah, he does attack Simon, doesn't he? That's a little bit of misplaced blame there. But I do think the Lena scene I quite like, and I think it'll probably have a role to play next season, especially if we get the Rhaena Nettles thing. I think it'll probably end up with Damon being more active and trying to develop this relationship with his daughter rather than neglecting them as they have the entirety of their experience. And it was also my thought with him seeing Rhaenyra and Lena as well was that this season was cut from 8 episodes or 10 episodes to 8, right? And my thought is maybe there was a cut vision of Rhea. I think that could have been cool, and a cool manifestation of maybe Harrenhal at its most hostile, because she was just so just openly defiant of him.
Yeah,
to a point that we really haven't seen any other character do until Rhaenyra in season 2. So I don't know.
That would have been an interesting place to start with her. Our running joke was that he just didn't have any guilt over her. It's like, he doesn't feel bad about that one.
They knew better than to try that tact. They're he's like, I was well rid of that shrew. He hated her.
Bronze bitch, whatever he called her,
It would be a sheep then.
A sheep. It was. Then we had a goat, it was close enough. So, and it's neat that this scene also has Willem Blackwood in it, because Willem Blackwood is going to be the guy killed in front of the heart tree, right? And he's going to see that black goat right after it. And it kind of bookends this whole thing. So that's kind of neat. The other huge point here is that Damon has, actually, let's just back this up and kind of refresh ourselves on what the goal, if we're framing it as Alice. We'll just say Alice is driving it. Just keep it simple. Yes, there's probably more to it than that, but we'll just say Alice. He needs to become a man that will accept Rhaenyra as queen, and a man that will accept the supernatural. And those are two different things, but as we can see by the end, we know why he needs to accept both those things, because both those things are part of Rhaenyra's rule and the prophecy. So think about what happened to him here. He doesn't believe in the supernatural, but he's seeing his dead wife. So he's like, what am I supposed to think here? Okay, I'm struggling with sleep. It's my sleep. I'm seeing things because I'm not getting good sleep. It's not that strong of a denial, but it's what he goes with at first, but it just doesn't hold up over the course of the season because it just keeps hitting him with bigger and bigger visions and deeper things, and Alice keeps hitting him with things that she shouldn't know. So it just weakens his resolve. And this is the episode where Rhaenyra tells Jace about the prophecy. So I think that's kind of important, too, that it's framed with the thing that Damon can't be trusted with is being passed on to the actual heir of Rhaenyra, who Damon also, we saw how Damon treated Jace. He didn't really take Jace very seriously, did he?
No, not really.
Not really, yeah. So episode 5, this is when he actually talks to Lena, or actually when Lena says something. He doesn't talk to her. She talks to him. He sees her again, and she says, "Are you looking after our girls?" And the answer to that is
no.
No is the answer.
No, I won't even speak to them when I walk past one in a hallway. I won't even send them a letter. Like, no, I already know.
That would have been a really petty way to, like, not send letters to Rhaenyra, to be like sending a letter to Baela. He's like, I'm sending a letter to Baela. I'm doing well here, blah, blah, blah. You know, tell Rhaenyra I said hey.
But instead, he decided to do something even more petty by not even talking to his daughters. Like, yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if he would talk to his daughters. That might be further for him. I think one of the biggest, like, cut scenes from season 1 for me that we do know, like, actually, I think was filmed based on, like, I think they released it as like a pre-episode screenshot, and then just never happened. It was like Damon talking to his daughters after their mom died.
Yes.
Which I think that, like, I don't know. I mean, season 1, episode 6, which is when that would have happened, was already like probably the most overstuffed episode of the series by a pretty decent margin, by virtue of being after that massive time skip. But I still think it would have been, I don't know, it would have been decent to establish that, like, maybe there is some good in this guy. Like, he can at least comfort his daughters when their mom died. But
I agree. I agree. I think, and again, this is you're right about that. I wanted to see more of that because he had shown it to his brother, but without his brother seeing it. Again, season 1, episode 1 did this, right? He was the one that was like to Rhaenyra when Rhaenyra was hesitating at the funeral. He's like, "Hey, your father needs you right now." And so we did see that little snippet of him being a good brother indirectly. And that it means a lot because, yes, it shows that he has this capacity. He does have this mode. He has this gear. He's not a total narcissist that can't feel happiness for other people.
Well, he's felt the grief at a parent's loss. He knows what it feels like to lose a parent. So him speaking to his daughters about their parents' loss would have been very resonant. Good point. So this continues in this episode, still episode 5, when this is the field of Harrenhal moment where he's building. If you build it, they will come. And what comes is whispers on the wind. He looks up. He sees Alice basically staring at him from way up there on that balcony, and he's hearing voices and screams and the sound of peasants being murdered by Blackwoods. And she brings that up, and he's like, "Oh, they're news?" And she's like, "News?" Like, she's all like snarky about it. Like, I love it because you can't, like, get in Damon's face and, like, challenge him and be, like, authoritative like that. He'll just respond with his version of that, which is overwhelming and overbearing. But if you needle him and she's just breaking him down and just teasing him, it's like, it's almost mocking, but not in a way that is direct, you know? I love that. So he slowly kind of has to accept what's going on here. It's just constant. Like, he can't, if he refuses this one thing, but then there's another and another and another. And it's like, she's not beating him down. She's like treating him like a child. She's like, it's so obvious, Damon. Right? I like that a lot.
I do too, and I think it's a good episode for, like, further establishing their dynamic, because, like, they had that one conversation in episode 4, but it's good to see growth there, and I think it's the first glimpse of, like, Damon thinking that, like, maybe she could actually have some use insofar as, like, she does end up having use in murdering Lord Tully. But...
yeah, it wasn't what he expected. But like, whoa, that's quite useful, actually. Thanks for that. Yeah. And so if you follow this pattern, the way she talks to him, she almost never, like, takes an aggressive tone. She's careful to keep that, like, mothering tone almost, or that, like, older sister tone, which there's no ego in her. She doesn't care what he says. There's a stubborn, powerful man to manipulate, and that's her job, and she knows how to do it. Like, she has a goal here. That's how it comes off to me anyway. So, and speaking of, this is the Oedipus dream, which I just now realized in the document I wrote Epidus.
It's better than I would have felt it.
That's funny. Who's Epidus, man? Yeah. Anyway, so he has a sex dream, and he doesn't realize who it is, of course, until deep into it. And I think the details of the dream are really interesting, which I think a lot of people may have been too grossed out to notice. But he's not being pleasured by anything physical she's doing. He's pleasuring her, and she's saying all the pleasure for him is the things she's saying. She's like, "You're the best dragon rider. Viserys lacked the stamina to rule." It's like, again, it just touches on the fact that, lust, sexuality doesn't really move Damon that much. It's really the power and the recognition. Because even in a mom dream, it's his mom telling him how good he is, and how great he is. That's the thing that I think matters more. Is that how you saw it too? Like, I know this is a deep, there's all sorts of psychology here, but.
No, absolutely. Especially given that, season 1, episode 1, the first instance of us seeing Damon in a kind of capacity such as that, like any sexual situation, we see him with Mysaria, but he kind of just gets disengaged partway through and goes to brood out the window because he's disagreeing with his brother. I think that it's very much framed as kind of tertiary to Damon. Like, it's a thing he will do, a thing he can do. He'll further his line. He'll use it to manipulate people like he does with Rhaenyra. But beyond that, he doesn't seem the most interested in it, which is interesting as far as certain other characters in just the series generally go. Because I think those are two dimensions that can get overlapping at points, and he very much keeps them separate spheres.
Right on. Yeah, I think it's something that makes him definitely gives him a little more of uniqueness as a character.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that is different about him as compared to Aemond, who definitely has a lot of his issues are wrapped up in sex in the opposite way. Like, he needs it to feel loved or accepted, or I don't know exactly what, but he does. Certainly.
I don't know how else to say it, but there's something kind of innately horny about Aemond. Like, he kind of and there's a sexlessness about Damon in terms of us talking about the mirroring, right?
If we're going further with that mirroring, it can be seen in their relationships with Alice. I think that with Damon, it's they don't have any romantic connection at all. It seems like maybe they're there's a flirty line from her here or there, but he just doesn't register it.
He doesn't buy it. Yeah,
either messing with him or a means to an end.
Yeah.
But with Aemond, at least in the book, we see a more kind of deeper relationship form there.
Very curious how they're going to go with that one. It's a lot of possibilities.
I am so excited to see his visions. I expect to see, if Luke's actor doesn't look too old, we will see him. I
hope so. I really
like
think
that.
so and hope so, too.
I like that idea a lot. Yeah, I'm quite sure we'll be coming back to do a Aemond, Dreams of Aemond, or just Aemond and Harrenhal, if it plays out a little differently than Dreaming. So...
Yeah. Also, this vision just entirely unwatchable because her eyes are the same color.
I know. What the heck? Come on, man. Where's that broken nose? Come on.
I thought the nose was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have to have the broken nose. But, and of course, this is perhaps the most blatant of the engineered dreams in terms of the evidence that it's engineered, because Alice just mentions, it's too bad you didn't know your mother. And he's just like, what? He doesn't have a response because, again, it's at odds with his disbelief in the supernatural is still very powerful. He just doesn't have another explanation, though. He's like, well, maybe everybody knew my mother. It's public knowledge when my mother died, but how did she know that I was dreaming about it? Well, she didn't say I was dreaming about her. He maybe has an out in his mind, but it's weak. It's a very weak denial there.
And getting weaker, I think.
Yeah, and getting weaker. You're right. So episode 6 hits him with the big one. The person he feels most guilty about of all, Viserys. The first set of dreams, there's 2 sets of these dreams. The first one is in episode 6, and the second set's in episode 7. And it's the different versions of Viserys. Younger Viserys, well, still adult, of course, but not decrepit Viserys, which is what we do see in episode 7. So in episode 7, if we divide the themes for Damon, it's more about Damon's ambition in episode 6, and in episode, especially his status as being heir. And this episode 6, it's more about being a brother, his failure as a brother. So I call this part Revisiting Exile. And again, remember in the intro, I brought up how he said, talking about, you never made me hand. But when and during that argument, it starts with, did you say it? Heir for a day, all that. And this time, though, we actually learned that Damon was very hurt by this. Yes, we also see Viserys was hurt by it after he kind of crumbles into tears after Damon is sent away. He's like, I hated having to do that. Damon hated it too. but he didn't show his emotion at the time, Damon. This time we see him overcome. He goes to his knees, says, "Don't look at me." It's like he is absolutely reduced to a childlike state.
He tries to leave too.
Yeah, and he can't. It's like kind of the opposite of hold the door. It's open the door. And but going to his knees, I think, is also symbolic too, that he's like kind of accepting some of these truths and bending the knee to his brother in a backwards kind of dream state way. Did you kind of see it that way too, or is that maybe?
I did.
Cool.
And I think that it was. I think you really hit it on the head there with the like kind of difference in tone here. Like the first scene in episode 1, that's like it's just the two layers. Like we have the what's actually seen, and then the emotions of both of these parties. Because like even Viserys saying it's just so much more like downtrodden and like melancholy as compared to him like yelling.
Yeah.
I was happy to hear "laughing with your whores and your lick spittles" again. Was one of my favorite line reads in the first season.
He's so good.
Yeah, I think when we watched it, Aziz was like, "Say it."
I was doing the exact same thing. But also, I'm. This is another thing I'm meta convinced of. This better get Considine an outstanding guest actor Emmy. I think.
I know, right? I couldn't help but feel that it was very calculated.
I think this is engineered for that purpose.
I think so too. I just think they're kind of boned based on their timing in the year. I think they gotta be a springtime release for them to get Emmy recognition. That's just my gut reaction there, but that's not what we're talking about. But I think HBO, change your time slot and you'll get all the nominations.
So it's an engineered dream, but it's also an engineered Oscar situation, right? Yeah.
Emmy. It would be quite
Emmy, my bad. Yeah, it'd be weird to get an Oscar. Yeah, that would be even stranger. Like, no, Oscar is Oscar Tully. He gets Tully. Yes, the Oscar is the in-world award for awesome kid. That's the Oscar goes to the teenager who wins the Oscar. So, and that's the thing about this dream that's also huge, is that he's seeing other people's perspectives. He sees Viserys' perspective on what happened after he left that room. He sees how Viserys really felt. It's not Viserys was mad at him. I mean, he was, but behind that, he wept for his brother, and that's the part that Damon never acknowledged, and maybe could have subconsciously, or if he had thought about it. So he's finally seeing how he's making people feel. He experienced that to a lesser extent with Rhaenyra earlier in the season. He was rejecting that. But here, he's not really rejecting it, is he? He's kind of just like taking it all in. He's got this look on his face that he's, well, it's not rejection. It's not anger. It's guilt. It's sadness, I think, and then he's asking for help,
Mm-hmm. And also, one thing that I was surprised to not see in Visions generally is the heir for a day.
Mm.
Like, we never see him say that in the first season, and I thought it maybe could have been interesting to see, like, what was the tone he used for that? Was it, like, celebratory? He seemed kind of just, I don't know, grief-stricken before that, and I don't know. That would have been interesting to see as well.
I would have, yeah. It's kind of funny when you think about it. Like, this guy's pride and stubbornness are so amped up and to 11 or whatever metric you want to use, that no human was ever able to bring him back. It took the old gods to undo Damon's pride and ego. Actual gods. And about 6
to
episodes.
Be made that's many humans.
Okay, good point. Yes. Many humans, a whole network of them, perhaps. Yes. So in between the second Viserys dream of episode 6 and the first one is when he yells at Alice and asks for help, and comes out of that like she's gotten deep into the breaking down of him, and this is when he's starts to lash back out. But pretty quickly after that, she's got him. She's like, okay, what can I do? What can you? She's like, you do nothing, just chill here for a few days and I'll go take care of Grover for you. And he's like, all right, well, this is working out quicker than I thought. And then in that span, one of those 3 days, he has the next dream. And so he comes up, he's thinking to himself, I think, that he always saw himself as loyal. And in a certain way, he was. Like, he's always, if anyone ever challenged his brother, he would have fought for him. If it was just him and his brother and 1,000 guys, he would have pulled out his sword and stood in front of his brother. And to him, that means everything. And it does mean a lot, but it's not everything. As a warrior, yes, you were always there for your brother. But as a brother who has needs other than swords, especially during a time of peace, y'all, he has spent a lot of his life, Damon did, in denial about what it means to be a brother in ways other than defending him, your brother. So Harrenhal is when that changed, obviously. And this is why his brother is the culmination of the family ghosts. He's the one that he failed the most, the one that he tried to be the most loyal to, and for most of his life thought he was, and was peevish about it, and only for all that to fall apart when he realizes the truth, that he wasn't there for him. And this moment right here, the death of Aemma, is huge. Now, he wasn't there for this moment at all. He's entirely seeing this. He sees his brother just weeping over Emma's body, and he's just there holding him. He's like, this is what I should have done. I should have held you, and that's it. That's all I needed to do. Just be there, hug you, tell you it's going to be okay, tell you I'm here for you. And he didn't do that. And it's too late to do that now. So he feels horrible about it. But that's what that's what happens when you repress something that important for, a decade or more, a lot more, really. Show canon, that would be like 20 years or so. And so he can't replay it in real life, but he's doing it here in his dream and admitting all these things, and it's hugely cathartic, a huge turning point too, right?
It is. It's a massive watershed moment insofar as like his actions and dreams previously have either been to try to like attack it or flee or just not knowing what's going on. This is the first time he's actively like trying to do better. He's trying to fix what he should have done. These dreams have gotten to a point where they're not like scaring him. He's not just so confused anytime something's happening that he's trying to make amends with his brother. And I think that we very much see that as a turning point, given that this is kind of, I wouldn't say it's his first positive dream, but they seem to take a turn for the positive after this. But I also think that's tied into other things that happen in the next episode.
Absolutely, yeah. I remember at the time we were like, well, this probably isn't the last one, but it feels like it's close to it. Like it feels like Viserys felt like the culmination. I thought this one in episode 7 would be the last one. Then, of course, there was the supernatural thing, which is maybe...
I counted as the last one.
Yeah. Separate category, maybe, but it's definitely a dream, so,
Yeah, it's kind of different. What's the difference between a dream and a vision, right?
Yeah.
Like he was having a very clear vision where he went out to that tree and touched the tree versus he was having these dreams.
There's a more clear defining beginning point to it, what kicks it off. What I guess throws it off a little bit is that some of the other dreams he was walking around, like they were waking dreams, so they're still they still have that vision-like quality to them, but yeah, I agree.
Personal. They were still personal in tone and not about the grand scheme.
Absolutely, that's another huge difference. Yeah, you're right. So this is the episode where Damon executes Sir Willem Blackwood, and this is important because of how it fits into all these things. There's a lot of supernatural overtones here. He does it in front of the heart tree, and just after the execution, he returns to the dream state, seeing the black goat he saw the day he met Oscar for the first time. So that's all pretty funny. It all comes back around. The black goat, Oscar Tully, and an execution. We're all paired together in that same moment.
I never made that connection. That's really cool.
Right? The execution was him kill a dream execution the first time around, but still. So they got Rhaenyra's head, and of course Jaehaerys's before that, sort of, but...
Yeah, I really like the layers to the goat as well. With like there's a deity, the black goat of Qohor.
Yeah,
I think I only know that from the Forsaken chapter. And then there's also Vargo Hoat, obviously. So it's just layers on layers of symbolism there that I love.
So, by the way, another little fun connection here. He cuts Rhaenyra's head off in his dream right in front of the throne. That throne, of course, was made by Balerion's fires, just like Harrenhal was put into its current state by Balerion. So Balerion's all over the place, the mark of that big black dragon.
Raises an interesting point. Do you think we'll see, obviously not this many, but do you think we'll see any visions in the Aegon the Conqueror series?
Yeah, I think we'll have to, because, and I think, actually, I'm glad you asked that, but I'm more curious about how they'll do that in Dunk and Egg. Will Daron the drunkard have dreams? I think so. I think they don't have a lot of special effects budget to blow on actual dragons. Yeah. I think they'll probably go pretty big with the tournament. The tournament will probably be more exciting, and
Trial of the Seventh is gonna be great.
Like just that they've always done a great job with tournaments. So I think they'll step it up a notch because it's such a big part of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm really curious. Daron the drunkard's dreaming, how they'll handle that. And maybe they'll have Egg, Aemond, other people have dreams, because Aemond says, all my brothers dreamt of dragons. He was maybe not referring to supernatural in every case, but they could take it that route if they wanted to. Absolutely. And I don't think anyone would complain too loudly. Not me anyway.
No.
So when Damon arrives at his room after the execution, after seeing the Black Goat again, and after winning the River Lords, it's a good time for this confrontation because the army is his now. He's like, he's done it, but what's he going to do with it? Damon is Viserys is sitting on the weirwood bed in his room, pondering the crown. He's just looking at it. He's not wearing it. He's just looking at it like it's his orb, pondering the orb. And he says, all who wear it are crushed by it. And do you want it still? And Damon's face is he's a little bit horrified, you know. He's, like you said, he's been getting used to these dreams, but I mean, this is his brother who obviously has a lot of feelings about it, and it's the decrepit version of his brother. And the straightforwardness of the offer, it is very confrontational. It's like, well, this is what you've probably been thinking about a lot, Damon, but now it's time to decide. And it's framed so differently from Damon thinking, oh, you gave it to Rhaenyra because you loved her more and because of the stupid prophecy. Now he's like, well, you loved your daughter more than me, but you still gave her the throne, even though this is what it does to a person. You knew that the throne is hard. You know the crown does this to a person, you still let your daughter inherit it because of how important you felt the prophecy is. So it flipped it. He's like, wow, I've been denigrating this logic, this reason, this choice that meant so much to y'all, that was super important. And he still hasn't accepted the prophecy at this point, but he has, I think, by this point, accepted that that's why he was rejected for it. It doesn't make him believe in it, but he understands that it was important to Rhaenyra and Viserys, and that was why he was left out. And that's a pretty big thing to realize.
I also think it very much, these visions very much mirror Damon's current state in life, and I think that it is significant that this one does come right after he gets his army, he gets what he wants, so he gets what he wants in the dream. And I also think that giving the weirwoods what they want probably play a role as well, in that he does a blood sacrifice right in front of weirwood, and then immediately has oh, here's exactly what you've always wanted, have it.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. Do you think maybe that's now that we're moving towards the big dream, the big vision, is that maybe why? So to me, the simple answer is, well, Alice is pushing Damon towards this because Team Black has the prophecy. They're the ones acting on the prophecy. Team Green, other than Helena, maybe, is not really acting on it. So that would be a reason for her to choose a side if she's choosing a side. Do you think that's what's happening? Is there more? You think there's more to it, or why is Alice doing any of this? I mean, to serve the prophecy, I guess, but maybe not.
My thought is mostly serving the prophecy, primarily not because of what happens in season 2, but what also happens in the book. I think that her relationship with Aemond and steering him to do what he does with burning the Riverlands and then eventually fighting and dying to / killing Damon. I think it's more kind of true neutral than anything on either side.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I like that. So he accepts his guilt. He accepts he had a big negative impact on his family that he hadn't accepted before. He's accepted his role in a lot of things. And he perhaps accepted that he doesn't know how to handle problems saved by the sword. In fact, let's skip ahead a shade. Let's read that quote now. The key line that Alice says to him when she's leading him to the heart tree really just says the thing I just said, but more succinctly.
When you came here, you were a closed fist who wished to bend the world to your will. But you've discovered, I think, that this world will not be governed. There are omens here for those who seek them.
Right, and of course, that's this is when she then says, you don't scoff? Because she's just checking, we've been working on you all season here, and at first you weren't so into it, but now? And
that's the last, Capatcha test. That's the I'm not a robot button.
Please identify that you are not someone who rejects the supernatural. Slide this puzzle piece into position. How many street lights?
Yeah. Traffic lights.
How many heart trees do you see? That's great. I love that. So I did see at first some people out in the, Twitteros and Reddit and et cetera saying that they didn't think the supernatural vision was necessary because he's already flipped. He's already loyal to Rhaenyra. Why does we need the supernatural turn on top of that? Well, I think there's a little more to it, but let me hear your take on it first.
I was going to say, I was one of the people who was initially a little skeptical about this vision, but I think for different reasons than those you've said.
Yeah.
My main issue is the timing. I think that this vision would be nigh perfect if it were if the scenes were reordered and it happened after Damon declared for Rhaenyra. Because I think that his arc so far has been so deeply personal about his relationship with power, with his brother, with his wife. I think that that is so much the core of why he is going to support Rhaenyra. And I think that with the show in the current order that it was in the episode, it risks a misinterpretation or even a correct interpretation by certain elements of it that maybe he's just supporting Rhaenyra because of this prophecy, which I don't think is the case. I think that it would be a clearer text if that order was flipped. I
agree with you. Maybe not the flipping, but I do that. I think that would solve it. But I think just to say it more simply, I think that this wasn't communicated very well, which is what you offered a solution to communicate it better. So we're pointing to the same problem. The distinction between what Damon came around on, it looked like just one big coming around rather than two important things he needed to come around on separately that kind of happened in back-to-back episodes, and maybe that distinction was lost by how they bled into each other. Yes, blood being a pun in this context. Because loyalty to Rhaenyra and a willingness to die for the future of humanity are definitely different things. Now they are connected because he sees in the dream that loyalty to Rhaenyra is connected to saving humanity. So they're not, which is, to be fair, part of why people see these things as so connected. But also accepting your guilt and accepting that the supernatural is real, that's a little easier to see as different things, right? Like the supernatural was used as a device to show him his guilt, but it wasn't by itself. It wasn't, showing him the prophecy and all that other stuff. So yeah, he goes from a guy that's like all about himself to someone that's like, yeah, I'm willing to die for the cause or what have you, or I'm going to die to make this happen. And this is also, I think, a fair flaw to point out that in the book, we don't know what changes his mind. It's just not there. It could be something along these lines. It could be something entirely different. Who knows? But it has to be something in the vision. It has to convince him that it's not just a false vision. Something contextually or internally made him believe what he's seeing, which I think is always an interesting thing with any vision. Like when Bran is seeing the weirwood visions, well, how does he know this isn't all just BS? Well, he does.
To a point, I think that's also seeing his father. I think was at least for Bran. Like that first vision of Ned, I think is what he realizes oh, this is something like I can actually see the past. I can see this guy, my father, who I miss, who's died.
Yeah,
It is interesting to think what that moment might have been for Damon. I think the rest of the season before this was kind of that moment. Yeah, in getting him to believe the supernatural is here and can do stuff. Little
by little, yeah. Just not trying to just slam it all in his face at once. Just kind of like the dripping. It's like a little slow drip.
I like that a lot. That's so cool.
Nice job, Harrenhal. Yeah, remember, he yelled, he said drivel at Alice. He was so mad. It's no, just accept that that's a curse. He's like, no, I won't accept that there's a curse. But but not long after he accepts that there's a curse. So it didn't take a couple more things happen, her going flying off as an owl. It's all right, I'm just gonna have to accept this. She just goes to Riverrun in 3 days. She doesn't have a dragon. Only I can fly around. Only Littlefinger can teleport like that. And Littlefinger doesn't exist yet. Come on, right?
Theon can too. By the end.
Right. So, but here's the other difficulty that I was getting into is Rhaenyra has no reason to fully accept all this. She's like, you're just on my side now? They haven't had a chance to talk about the vision that he had. She's understandably wary that he's flipped entirely. We as viewers know that it's sincere, or we have every reason to believe it's sincere. But Rhaenyra, we got to put ourselves in her shoes, and she's like, you just believe all this now? Why? I'm not so sure. We're going to have a more thorough conversation about this later, Right?
There's been zero contact, and the only thing she's heard is Simon Strong saying, hey, I'm worried he's turning against you.
Yeah. And then he's like, I'm here. I'm all for you. For all she knows, he found out Simon sent the message and was just I'm just going to pretend. I'm just going to put on a big show for her, or something and act like it. But it looked convincing. He bent the knee, but still.
I wish we'd seen an interaction between Damon and Adam there.
Yes!
I keep forgetting that Adam went with Rhaenyra, which I was thinking, he could just trick her and attack with his dragon, but it would have been 2-on-1, which is worth noting.
Yeah, I know. That was what I was thinking. That was how we explained it. We're like, well, she kept him in the air in case something went wrong, right? Yeah, and by the way, that's what happens at King's Landing. When she takes King's Landing in the book,
that's true.
Adam is the one that stays up in the air. So I was like, okay.
It's good building that role already.
Yeah, but Damon should have been like, who's that? You're like, what?
Laenor's back?
Is Laenor's back? Right? Are we done with that charade now?
What I kind of had to figure from that, because I kept expecting that, was that Damon isn't contacting them. They're still sending letters to Harrenhal and being like, hey, we got some new riders. Hey, your daughters miss you. You know what I mean? Rhaena disappeared. Yeah. I don't know. I think he's receiving missives, and he knows.
That's a good point.
Makes sense.
There's also some changes in his behavior. You can just smaller changes in how he interacts with people that kind of shows that he's changed. Going back to beating the messenger with his helmet at the stepstones and shoving the squire during the tournament, just being rude to people around him because things aren't going his way, or worse than rude. Beating the messenger is worse than rude. And he was rude to Oscar Tully and then regretted it later. It's see, you gotta think ahead a little, Damon. You can't just, but more importantly, people are asking him questions and talking to him about the army, and he's not pleasant, not kind, but he's not haughty. He's not arrogant. He's not dismissive anymore. And you can really see it with Sir Alfred, because he's pretty mild towards this traitor, and he's didn't figure you for a traitor. This place kind of drives you mad. Yeah. So I took that. I didn't catch the first time around, but thinking about it for this episode, it's he's definitely softened a little bit.
Chilled out.
Yeah, chilled out. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, a little less fire, a little less of that Targaryen fire in him. A little more managed.
Whereas I think when Aemond goes to Harrenhal, I imagine it's going to be the opposite.
Yeah. Oh boy, because he's going to be so enraged. He's going to find out, I guess, that King's Landing was taken, and/or that the battle, that the Lannister army is lost, or taken heavy casualties.
Going to fish feed?
Huh?
I always get the Riverland battle names mixed up.
That's the fish feed. Yeah, well, it's got multiple names. Yeah, fish feed.
Lakeshore.
Battle by the Lakeshore. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, so I wonder if they're going to change it and tweak that, because prediction of they want to show battles. That's an important one. They can't show all the battles. There are too many, and that one doesn't have dragons in it. So they're on one hand, well, that makes it easier, but it's still really damn hard to film battles with or without dragons.
If I had to guess, I've seen this prediction a couple times elsewhere as well. I think Lakeshore and Butcher's Ball might get
jammed into one. Yeah,
I could see that being the two big Riverland battles without dragons.
Kind of a running double battle thing, or a connected campaign kind of thing. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. What do you think about the idea that this is pretty far off our main topic, but we got a minute or two here, of that it'll be Cregan leading them, because there was that whole weird thing with him being deleted.
That really weird thing with him being edited out of that final shot.
Yeah, I made that prediction a while ago because of the standard law of conservation of characters. It's there's a very good chance that Cregan will just be the guy who leads those troops. And then they almost did it, but then they deleted him, but that doesn't mean that maybe they just haven't decided. So there's we'll delay that decision.
The way I read it, and this was before all of the current drama happened, I would have imagined that was that raised up massive alarm bells from Martin. A lot else in the show wouldn't. Because having Cregan removed from this conflict in order to come in for the Hour of the Wolf is such an important dynamic that I think it has to be preserved. Nettles, I'm sure he's upset about. There's also a bit of an out they could potentially have there too. But sure. I think that that is the one specifically they would have the power to shift out and kind of bounce from the season if need be. I think that I don't think that'll be redone in the future. I hope not, at least. Not that I do want to see more of Cregan. I feel like Jace was kind of underutilized in the first half of the season. He should have just been in the Vale and in the North for that time, but I think that was a victim of not being able to rewrite the scripts.
Agree. Yeah. The behind the scenes on the script writing was very different from season 1 and season 2. I think that's something that maybe got lost in the shuffle. We know that they had extra time in season 1 because of COVID. They got to do more rewriting, which clearly that was good. It did. Yeah, it showed. And then this time it was the opposite. They were severely hindered on that by the writer's strike and other stuff, and now budget on top of that. So yeah, damn it, studio, get your act together. Yep. Okay, so really, returning to the heart tree and the dream, Damon puts his hand on George R. R. Martin's head there, which was so meta. I'm gonna read your mind now, George. The blood comes pouring out. That was so cool. That was a nice touch. So let me get your thoughts on the actual dream. You can go you say whatever you want about it. We've got we've got a little bit extra time here, so.
I thought it was really well done. I loved the quick cuts. It was very much what I had imagined from a lot of other A Song of Ice and Fire dream sequences. There are parts I thought we could have lingered on a little bit more, and there were some elements that actively made me have a little bit more of a question mark, most notably the White Walker mask. Probably could have had a few more dollars or some VFX devoted to it.
Just reuse it.
Everyone's least favorite
White
part.
Walker, save thousands of dollars and don't embarrass yourselves. I'm sorry. You're speaking my language, because that's my biggest grievance of all season.
The most bizarre oversight that is so clearly so terrible.
I just again, I said it at the time, and I'm like, think about how many people signed off on that, Quinn. Think about how many people were like, yeah, it looks good to me. It looks great.
It's like the Iron Man built this in a cave. You guys did this with no budget in 2011. That was frustrating. But other than that, I quite liked it. People had issues with Bloodraven having two eyes or not being albino enough, but I thought he was great, and I also think it's probably the actor we're going to see in Duncan Egg come.
I hope so. He looks good.
The first season. He did. I love
He looks good. I hope so. Otherwise, we'll have 4 Bloodravens. Otherwise,
oh my god!
If it's not him, we'll have 4 actors for him. But
that's awesome. I hope that's the case now. But yeah, we were actually talking about this before the stream, but on my initial viewing of the visions, I thought that for a split second, because my eyesight is bad, I thought Daenerys was bald after the pyre, which would be
book canon. Me too. I had the same thought. Well, I saw the leaks of it, and so it was a really bad quality version
on
of it.
TikTok.
Yeah, I saw those, and the bad quality version, she looked bald to me, and I got real excited about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought the visions were very well done. Definitely the whole dream versus vision debate is interesting, because in terms of what we get in Ice and Fire, it's very much more dream, because when we see Bran go into the weirwoods, it's less visions like we see in the show. It's more he's slipping backwards in time throughout this single tree, which isn't what's happening here. So I think it walks on the dream side of the line. What did you think of it overall?
Yeah, I really liked it too. I also laugh at the White Walker. It's just kind of inexplicable, but I've weighed in on that before. I did really like what elements they choose to include. Yeah, I do. I kind of agree that I wish it had been a little bit. Some of the spots have been a little bit longer. Maybe there's a couple of things that would have been cool to include. I really wonder which dragon that was lying there dead. I thought
Vermithor.
You think so? I think it might be Sea Smoke. It could be Tumbleton, but that's the same. If it's Vermithor or Sea Smoke, it's either way. That's Tumbleton. Yeah, either way. So yeah, it sets that up pretty well. And I feel like that's maybe explains partly how Damon was feeling these events and seeing them as true, and having a confidence that these events would come to pass, because he just is so bought in after that. And it's hard for me to accept that he would be that bought in after being the way he was before that, without being deeply, deeply affected by it. So yeah, a little bit of a magical element. I think mostly it's human though. A real person seeing magical truths, making a human decision because of those truths. And she says, yeah, Alice had been guiding him and had been in his head to enough times to prove that she was doing it. He knew through news, through whispers on the wind, through the mention of his mother, through all these other things. Okay, this is too much proof. And so with all that proof, it helped make this easier to swallow. It's one thing to be brought into it by visions of his own existence, things he's familiar with, his family, into the cosmos and the grand everything. That would be a rough place to start. I know you said that they could put a bit of a little different order, and I agree with that, but it wouldn't have been proper to start with that, right? That would have been crazy, right? So he would have just been no, I reject all this. And then you've probably dug a deeper hole to get him convinced. He's dug his heels in even deeper. So, and as far as the helping the murder of one other question, Oscar, the murder of Grover. I wonder about that. Like, in the book, it's much simpler. He just eventually dies, and that's Riverrun just stays out of it until that point. That the Lord and the grandfather.
It was like late in the war.
Yeah, very very late.
Well, he doesn't want to stay out of it because doesn't Elmo try to get involved despite his father not wanting them to?
The old man wants to send the army out, but the young man closes the doors and is like, nope.
Because the old man wants green, right?
Yeah, he wants green. Yeah, he's with the Brackens.
So it's a little bit more complex than that, and that Elmo is alive and he's already dead at this point, etc.
Those Muppets throw things off. Always throwing things off.
It still makes me so sad that they cut Kermit and Elmo.
Yeah, it makes me sad too, but we get it.
It was really funny at the World of Ice and Fire shoot at DragonCon. We're going to show pictures next week, y'all, for those waiting to see the Muppet Tullys. But at the World of Ice and Fire shoot, I was dressed as a Muppet Tully, as Oscar Tully, with Kermit, Grover, and Elmo. And you could hear people be like, "Why are the Muppets here?" And then you hear someone else like whisper back, like, "Well, in George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood," and like it was a very educational cosplay, which I like.
It sounds like it. The one other thing that I'd thought of that kind of ties back into the previous discussion of like, will we see the God's Eye or anything? The Green Man could be a point in favor for that.
Good point, because we did see one.
Yeah. They did all that work. They did prosthetics work, right? Like they conceptualized what a Green Man looks like for them, right?
True.
Like that's a hard thing to do, and they put the effort into doing it. So I think you're right. It is a point in that favor.
I like that idea. Yeah, and I wonder how the fact that they've given us this very clear vision for Damon in front of the weirwood, if that affects or how that ties into the slashes on the weirwood. Is he going to get bitter or like is it just because it's still a trace of that like aggressiveness, like maybe a little bit of anger towards this fate that he knows he's like, well, I'm gonna die now. Here it comes. Are you really gonna make me wait for it? I gotta sit here and wait like in a waiting room for my own death. Like, come on, let's get this over with. I don't know. Something like that.
It could also be like maybe he's frustrated and like he's trying to like touch the weirwood and have these visions, but since Alice isn't there, she's with Aemond, he just lashes out.
Oh, that's interesting. He's cut off from that without her help. Yeah, I wonder. That's another thing I really wonder about is how the dynamic of Alice has as it plays out with Aemond and Damon, because we know they're obviously already enemies, so that's not going to change. But yeah, will he be upset that she's on his side and has a relationship with, or is that just all? Yeah, that's really cool.
I hope they do more with that scene than like because like the lines that are already there in Fire and Blood are like obviously super iconic. I think there's a lot of room to build there as well.
I agree.
That dynamic.
In our episode a couple weeks ago with Joe Magician, we talked about some of the stuff and how the supernatural feels like it's very involved with that. Like, how did Damon's like, well, how did you know to come here? And he's like, well, Alice Rivers told me you'd be here. And he's like, well, you wouldn't have come if I was alone or if I wasn't alone, And he's like, well, how did you know I was alone? It's like, yeah. It's like, well, magic, right? So something else is going on there. And I also wonder how that's going to go with the child. Since we have a minute here, I want to get your opinion on that. What do you think is the deal with Alice Rivers' child later? Like, we obviously don't know. We don't have Blood and Fire and Blood 2. Is she trying to create the conditions of the Song of Ice and Fire? Is she trying to create a Jon Snow type figure with that, or?
There's a very simple answer in the text that I think a lot of people are ignoring. Just at the main series. That's Robert Strong.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's not the mountain under there. It's Robert Strong, the son of Aemond Targaryen.
Little dude grew very big.
No, I'm kidding. I think it is interesting that there's like completely lost thread. It's kind of like Maegor the Second type thing.
Yeah,
where like
that kid.
Targaryen are banished, but like this one's in the middle of Westeros, which is strange. You know what might seem most likely to me, especially like all this talk of like, at least from the actors, Masari is much older than she seems. maybe it's not. Did I say Mysaria?
Yeah, you meant Alice. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Maybe
yeah. You might have been thinking Melisandre, who also yes.
This could be like a Mysaria situation with like declaring she's pregnant, like happened in episode 2.
Yeah, and then wasn't.
And then no baby ever materializes.
What do you think about this idea that, okay, so we know that the winter that's going to come, or that has begun during the Dance of the Dragons, lasts like 5 years. It's a really bad winter. It's a particularly long one. Someone like Alice might have thought, oh, this is it. This is the big one. So we need to get this on now. We need to have, well, I really do need to have this. This child doesn't exist. We need to make him. It might still be too late at that point, but
I did have another just thought right now, which is that like maybe it's a shadow baby.
We talked about that recently. I've become warm to that idea a lot, actually.
Because like, what if Damon does survive and like winds up on the lake shore somewhere or at that weirwood, and then like just gets killed by a shadow baby or somebody else?
Well, I thought it was so interesting because like she talks about how she feels the fires looking at her womb, you know, and to us, like rather than thinking of it as a shadow baby, I was kind of conceptualizing it as one of like the inverse of that, because she's not a shadow binder, she's not a fire user, she would do ice magic. So what would the inverse of a shadow baby be? You know, like a baby that you feel is lighting a fire in your room. That would be a baby of light. But I don't know that I go too far down that rabbit hole. And I like maybe most of all the idea that Alice is just using the idea that people could think she's pregnant as a, you know, power. I kind of like the idea most that she is not pregnant, but I don't know.
Couple of questions here from some viewers here. Stannis Baratheon says, does season 2 make you guys think at all that Damon will survive to live with the Green Men to be the one to teach Bloodraven? I don't know if I'd go that far, but I do think it's interesting how Damon has been given like this view into the lineage of Greenseers. I mean, he didn't see Bran, but he saw Bloodraven. I guess that's because that's his ancestor, or not his ancestor, but his descendant. But maybe that's why the one figure that he sees, like he could have seen. I mean, he sees Daenerys too. He could have maybe seen Jon Snow, but that's not. I don't know. I would guess no, but I do think that there is connections here. It's just maybe not that specific connection. What do you think, Quinn?
I'd agree with that. I think there maybe would have been more focus on the green site if that were the case. In that, like the one character we do see from the main series, like main character from the main series, Bloodraven's in it obviously, is Daenerys, and she is someone who's not connected with the magic of the old gods at all, as far as we're aware. So I think that I don't think it's likely that he survives. Just generally, I think that it's maybe a bridge too far in terms of just the physics of all of it, and like. I don't know. There have been some improbable survivals in Martin's work before, but unless he like gets resurrected somehow, which we have no reason to believe he would, I don't think it would happen.
White Damon, yeah. It'd be like a patch face. He went under the water and washed ashore and somehow survived. Yeah,
he's Damon pale hair.
He's got the pale hair already. D-Cell says, for Bloodraven to become the next Greenseer might also be one of the reasons to go for the Blacks. Okay, yeah, not just the prophecy, but because Bloodraven comes from that side of the family. That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay. I hadn't thought of that. That's a cool idea. What do you think about that one?
It's also, I agree with it. It's interesting. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation in that, like, the reason that he comes from that side is because that's the side that ends up surviving.
Yes, chicken and egg. You're right. Time travel conundrums. Yes,
I know. There's the interesting element of like Bloodraven is very tied into this, given that Damon, who was his great grandfather, executed assumedly his great uncle in front of this tree that he can assumedly see. So there is that, but I don't think it's too tied up.
Okay, yeah. Dornish Dame says, if this baby really exists, I love it. I love the idea it is an ancestor of the Ghost of Highheart. Yeah, I like that idea too. Ooh. It certainly could have that vibe to it. I mean, she's always seemed like she might have been part children of the forest, you know, the way she looks. And she certainly has the look of someone described with the red eyes and all that. Like, that's the mark of a Greenseer.
She's like notably like short, right?
Yeah,
as well.
Like really short. So that would be like not that many, given how long these people seem to live. That could be, the baby could be the father of the Ghost of Highheart.
And I mean, we don't know what
great grandfather.
We don't know what Alice looks like underneath if she has a
That's
glamour
true.
of some sort or does not look like that, we actually can't say. So, there's
And
that.
how could she have babies if she's really that old? Well,
Yeah.
old gods, that's how.
Yeah.
Player one says Bonifer Hasty would never have an unholy dream. He's too pure. No, Harrenhal wouldn't touch him, right? No.
Holy 100.
That's the other joke, right? Also, Roose Bolton, they're just like, we'll leave this guy alone. He's already there.
He's probably going to get his.
Oh, yeah, he will.
Is my guess.
For now, they aren't getting him, but yeah, they're giving him more time because they like him. Dom Tartaglia, shout out Folkwise Podcast, says Simon has Harrenhal dreams, but they're just him going on walks with his loved ones because he's so pure.
It's him and Lionel Strong getting tea every night.
Yeah. And that drip that he's wearing, like, imagine seeing that guy walk down the street. Like, whoa, that is maybe get a tracksuit or something, bro. His tracksuit would also be just like amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to see a tracksuit in the style of Simon's like brocade, beautiful thing, like just really ornate.
What? Awesome. Yeah. What does a fancy Harrenhal tracksuit look like? Like, I have no idea where to begin with that. Someone who's way more artistic needs to jump right on that one. Ranabir Mitra, how's it going? Ranabir says, a Twitter user Dark Sister with a V, Dark Svister.
Instead of the I in sister, it's a V. So if you wanted to look this up yourself, you can look up Dark Sister to released. That's the person who was releasing the season 1 scripts, which had the unaired Damon Viserys scene. Also, a lot of other interesting things. They had the wherewithal to make little edits where they basically like put visuals in the script and kind of made it a little bit more appealing to folks. So if you go to their Twitter, you can see that.
Right on. Cool. Very good. Good looking out there, Ranabir. Thanks for the questions, y'all. So that, I think, concludes our episode. I think we hopefully have given a good breakdown explanation of why Damon went from a very selfish, ambitious person who had a lot more nuance than just selfishness and ambition. He was also had a lot of softness that he was hiding and putting out there, keeping concealed because he's a second son warrior type, and that's what he's supposed to do, right? And then over time, he's evolved, and I think he has become one of the most interesting characters. He's always been one of George's favorite characters from this era, and I think that not everybody liked how he was handled, but I appreciate I like the scenes a lot. I like the Harrenhal scenes a lot, and I appreciate the expansion of his character, the depth they've given him. He's a very nuanced character. It's important for such a main character. If they're going to give a character this much time, if they're going to maybe not have enough time for some of the other secondary characters and tertiary characters that we wanted to see, at least the time they're spending with this character, I really like the supernatural elements being brought into it, and all that. What is your final statements, Quinn?
Wholeheartedly agree. I think that a big problem that season 2 is facing is that so many of these major characters that were established in season 1 do nothing for the period that they're going to cover. Damon goes to Harrenhal and sits there. Rhaenyra lays in bed the entire season. Alicent is just in King's Landing and doing nothing. I think that a lot of people compare it to the books and say, oh, the books have done this so much better. The books really don't do anything with these characters for this entire period. And I think that this is an excellent way to not only bring in some of the magical elements of the book series that were so neglected in the original adaptation. I think it's just a great way to continue this character's arc of growth in a manner that really kind of complements what he did in season 1. You can really track directly from that inciting incident at the end of season 1 with the prophecy and track his arc from there. And I really enjoy it. I think it's really well done. Very
well said, very succinct, very concise. Do you have any predictions about Damon for season 3 that maybe are not something people would expect? I mean, do you think the battle, the death scene will be the final episode of season 3 or second to last episode maybe? Or think maybe they'll save that for season 4?
I'm thinking penultimate of season 3 is my thought. The only way I see it not being in season 3 is if we only get 8, because I think that might be a little abbreviated.
Yeah. Yep.
In terms of his role, it'll be interesting to see, and that he'll simply be in King's Landing. That's where he is for this part of the story, and it'll be interesting to see him back there and actually. I mean, a lot of the things that he was going to do there are no longer possible. He's the guy who executes Otto Hightower, and I'm sure he'd really want to do that. But unless that prison that we saw Otto in is the Black Cells, which I don't personally think it is, He can't really do that right away, at least.
Agree.
I'm more partial to that Otto might die at Tumbleton, but
yeah. I think Iron Rod is still going though. I think Damon will cut his head off.
R.I.P. But yeah, he's like the only counselor. Yeah, and Orwell obviously survives. So
yeah. I wonder how they'll do Orwell. Yeah, yeah. It might just be poor Iron Rod only. Like, hey, come on, guys. Like, it's not just me. I'm not the only one. Well, yeah. Tell us what are your next videos planned? I know you just did something not a Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones, which I know our usual other co-host would be very happy to hear this. So,
I normally post videos about A Song of Ice and Fire, House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, that sort of thing. I recently did an analysis of my favorite episode of my favorite show, which is an episode of Better Call Saul. But I do have a lot more.
Amazing!
It's a very good show. I have a lot more.
Sean would be thrilled. I'm thrilled too. We're all Better Call Saul fans here. I think that is the best show of our modern era. It was the #1 show for me every year, so I'm thrilled to hear that. Yeah, what was that? What was it? Which episode was it about?
It was season 1, episode 8, Rico, which is my favorite series.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wait, which is that one? Season 1.
Yeah.
Was it the finale of season 1?
Season 1 is super slow and everything, and it kind of is, but my view on it's the one where like Chuck and Jimmy start the Sandpiper Crossing case, that big class action that ends up being a massive thing.
Yeah.
To me, it's like the happiest episode in both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and it's just like a nice little reprieve from like everything that both of those shows are. And
yeah, they are kind of dark, or kind of very.
But yeah, in terms of future stuff, A Song of Ice and Fire stuff, I hit 50,000 subscribers for like 10 minutes stream. So yeah, to celebrate that, I'm currently working on a video that's about half edited right now. I'm going through and ranking the core books and what I think about each of them in relation to each other.
Nice.
And then the bigger, larger project I'm working on that I just finished recording this past week is I am ranking every chapter in A Dance with Dragons as compared to each other. Because I think it's
a lot of chapters in that book.
I've always thought it's interesting in that like some of my favorite and my least favorite writing in the series is there. And I thought it'd be fun to compare it to itself and see how it tracks. That's
a great idea. I love that project. Well, I appreciate that. For my own part, I'll recommend your video on Laris. I really like that one. That's easy to find. Go to Quinn the GM on YouTube and just browse the catalog, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. You're a notable fan of John Connington, which is also a little unusual, but I appreciate, because we talked about this offline. I'm a big fan of Bittersteel, and those two characters have an awful lot in common. We joked how they would hate each other because of how much they have in common.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But John Connington is the best viewpoint, and that may be reflected in my chapter ranking, but I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible.
Number 1, John Connington. Number 2, John Connington. Everybody else after that.
Yeah. Really
I guarantee writing. At least one of those chapters isn't number 1.
No, I think the John Connington chapters have some very underrated, beautiful prose, some really nice writing in it. And in terms of you're talking about some of the best and worst writing, I think the John Con chapters just have some really quotable lines that are,
it's
beautiful.
The star and failed.
Yeah, they're pretty haunting. Yeah, there's some like George is good at writing those, tragic romance.
He's good at kind of unrequited romance, and in doing it in a way that I feel both recognizes the futility, tragedy, hopelessness, kind of pathetic pitifulness of it in a lot of ways, while also not denigrating it exactly and kind of still showing the nobleness of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not a fan of unrequited romance. I'm kind of biased against it, but I think he does it quite well.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And especially when it's like unrequited romance between like a gay man and a straight man, I think that there's a lot of pitfalls in doing that. I think that Martin does it really well and just manages to create, in addition to that excellent like dynamic and relationship that was, just how it lingers in this person in the present. And I think that like with his chapters being so poetic throughout for both of them, it's the thing that I'm looking forward to and wins the most, or maybe not the most, is kind of seeing that kind of maybe begin to fall away a little bit as the grayscale sets in, and like seeing how that changes things.
Yeah, me too. I'm super interested in that. Yeah, the grayscale, I'm excited for it, which is maybe kind of an odd thing to be excited for.
Yeah,
but
me too.
Because the show just like kind of just brush it off their shoulder. It's like they engage with it, and then they're like, you know what, let's just kind of not. So I think there's a lot of potential for stuff that we just haven't seen because we don't. It hasn't been spoiled for us, basically, like in that sense. Like the show didn't give away that because they hardly did anything with it.
I think they did a little bit.
Yeah, they did a little.
I'm partial to the idea that it's going to be Connington. The bells is still going to happen, but it's going to be Connington.
Same. Yep. Absolutely. It's very fitting. I mean, he talks about it in his POV, the burning of the bell. Yeah, that's a thing that haunts him almost as much as Rhaegar, if not more. And
I'd think more.
A lot darker. Yeah, probably more. Cool. All right, y'all. Let's see. Who else do I have to thank? We have our next week, as Ashaya said, we're doing our spin-offs update and Dragon Con Adventures podcast. We'll post photos of me as the Red Kraken, of Ashaya and compadres as the Muppet Tullies, plus some other things, and we'll talk about everything that's happening, updates with Dunk and Egg, 9 Voyages, Nymeria, all the stage play, everything that we know about the future projects that are in progress that haven't started yet. And that should mark the end of our show coverage apart from maybe a mention here or there. No more focused show topics for the rest of the season. I mean, for the rest of the year, rather, until the Night of the Seven Kingdoms starts, I guess. Once the first trailers of that, we'll get back to show content. But until then, we'll be all book content. We got the rest of Topics Moot to go through, and we've got Radio Westeros, Dance with the Dragons episodes.
We'll be back to our Michael Klarfeld intro.
Michael Klarfeld intro, that's right. We've got a pair of Baelor the Blessed episodes coming that were mostly written by Nina, and that's exciting because she has a lot to say about Baelor, and so do we, so that's why there's 2. Yeah, right? That's very big, yes. Big topic. Interesting character, that Baelor the Blessed, Baelor the Befuddled. So, but not Baelor the Brief. Yeah. Thanks to Quinn the GM for coming on. A great discussion. You're very well spoken and have a lot of great ideas. Really added a lot to discussion. This was an excellent episode, in my opinion, if I may say so myself. And thanks as well to everyone who came to watch live, to everyone who left a comment, clicked like. If you tell your friends, that's great. Word of mouth is, as always, the best way to spread the word about our podcast and Quinn's show as well. So until next time, folks, you know what to do. On behalf of Ashaya and the not here today Sean Pink, Valar, reread us.